To date, the largest outage in history, a day that sent shockwaves through the world and led to very real issues for everyday life. Banks, airlines, businesses, and IT departments everywhere fell into chaos. Was it a supervillain's evil master plan? Was it because of a greedy billionaire? Who, what, when, where, how, and why? Well, let's discuss. For those of you who watched the last video in this series, you'll remember some familiar names who helped create what we now know today as CrowdStrike, a company responsible for cybersecurity-focused software. Back in 2011, after McAfee's sale to Intel, CrowdStrike began taking its first steps into the world of cybersecurity, led by George Kurtz, who has remained the CEO, Chief Executive Officer, and a co-founder to this day since its inception. Also Dmitry Alperovich, former head of threat intelligence at McAfee, and later CrowdStrike's first CTO, Chief Technology Officer of CrowdStrike. And finally, Greg Marston, the company's first CFO, Chief Financial Officer, who is now retired. There's not a lot of information I could find on Greg Marston, except that he worked at CrowdStrike from 2011 to 2015, and that he was CFO at Networks in Motion from 2005 to 2013. It was difficult to just locate pictures of him. But as for Kurtz and Alperovich, we have some information and pictures to help illustrate this. Kurtz left McAfee to found and lead as CEO at CrowdStrike since its inception. Alperovich, born Russian and immigrant to the United States in 1994 with his family, helped to co-found CrowdStrike but left the company in 2020 to launch the Silverado Policy Accelerator, which is a nonprofit organization operating as a think tank. What a lot of people may have missed due to the incident we are about to dive into is that CrowdStrike had a big hand in at least two major cybersecurity news events since its inception, with CrowdStrike's name going under the radar in most news circles. Many may remember Sony Pictures getting hacked in 2014, which implicated North Korea, but many may not know that CrowdStrike had a hand in uncovering evidence that identified North Korea as the responsible party for the hack. Let me know if you'd like to see a video on this incident in a separate video. The second news event some may remember is when the Democratic National Committee was attacked through a variety of cybersecurity attacks, and the attacker looked to be Russian intelligence. Then FBI Director James Comey said to the press, ultimately what was agreed to is the private company would share with us what they saw. This private company Director Comey was referring to was CrowdStrike, identified as a cybersecurity company doing the internal defense and investigation for the DNC. CrowdStrike offers a variety of software related to cybersecurity, with them even releasing their own AI named Charlotte in February 2024. CrowdStrike's main cybersecurity software endpoint manager operates under the name Falcon. Falcon was CrowdStrike's first product launched back in June 2013, which is designed to detect and block stealthy infiltrations for both Windows and Macintosh, now known as macOS, according to networkworld.com, citing CEO George Kurtz. Falcon is akin to Microsoft Defender in providing real-time response to detected threats and providing logs to security technicians in times of investigations into security incidents. Like Defender, CrowdStrike's Falcon also has access to the Windows kernel, which gives it a lot of special permissions that your standard application doesn't have access to. To go off on a tangent for a moment, for those who may not know what a kernel is when referring to an operating system, OS, like Windows, Mac OS, or Linux, a kernel is defined according to geeksforgeeks.org as a kernel is the core part of an operating system. It acts as a bridge between software applications and the hardware of a computer. In other words, this is what allows a digital program to not only see, but have direct sight and control over objects in the physical world, such as the CPU, the central processing unit, which is basically the brain of your computer, the RAM, which is random access memory, basically part of the brain of your computer, helping to load things in real time and then offload that memory when it is no longer needed for accessing applications, and other devices that help your computer stay alert for you to use for whatever tasks you have at hand. Your average application like your favorite PC video game or your web browser for accessing a website like Facebook or YouTube doesn't have this specialized access, and this is locked down for the security of your computer. But applications for cybersecurity, such as CrowdStrike's Falcon or Microsoft's Defender, require access to the kernel of the OS because they need to ensure these physical components are actively being protected from as many possible avenues a threat can possibly take. Some threats, such as some forms of malware, can use exploits to access the kernel for malicious gain. This is like your job's IT personnel having admin permissions into any and every system and physical space in the company, but you don't have the same type of permissions. Because malicious parties may get that access, and your IT may need those permissions to resolve those threats too. So cybersecurity software makes the same argument to gain the same access into the kernel of the OS. There are different types of kernels used depending on the OS, but we will not go that in depth on this topic here. On the morning of July 19, 2024, IT workers around the world were rudely awoken from their state to many systems, both servers and employee workstations, entering random boot loops or getting stuck at blue screens of death. IT technicians and engineers struggled to find the cause and ran to forums such as Reddit, specifically subreddits like r/sysadmin and r/CrowdStrike, to seek answers for the troubles. Through coordinated efforts with each other, many came to the conclusion that the issue was directly related to those who relied on CrowdStrike Falcon for their cybersecurity monitoring on company devices. But this still had a tremendous impact on the world, as we would all learn that many of the things we do throughout the day, such as the fast food restaurants, airlines, banks, and more, all relied on CrowdStrike software, and we're experiencing heavy disruptions as a result of this on this particular day in July. A friend of mine worked for a company that was utilizing CrowdStrike during this time, and she shared her story with me to share with you, minus any identifying information.
That memorable July morning, the kind of memory that sticks with you like a bad haircut, still in bed, blissfully unconscious, dreaming about something undoubtedly more pleasant than what was about to unfold, when my phone decided it was time to ruin the day before it even started. My boss was on the other end, with the ever-charming request that I hop onto a call with my coworkers who had managed to gather almost no information except that anything running CrowdStrike was not running. I was jealous of the systems that were where I should be, asleep, though their slumbers were to blue screens of death and infinite reboot loops. Basically, the IT equivalent of the apocalypse for our org. In a stroke of cosmic generosity, our company was already in the midst of ditching CrowdStrike Falcon, an effort I was personally spearheading, but we still had just enough machines left to earn ourselves a front row seat to this absolute disaster. I laugh now when I think about it, because, if nothing else, it sped up our exodus from the product. And to really drive the point home, one of the servers to go down was the one that hosted our customer-facing website.
We can safely assume that she is speaking for many others working hard behind the scenes who had the misfortune to experience this. Everyone, please thank Natalie for sharing her story. As far as the timeline is concerned, it seems that this all started on Friday, July 19th, 2024 at 4:09 UTC. CrowdStrike did not formally make an announcement on this until hours later. However, some users on sites such as Reddit were sharing their own resolutions on how to reverse the outage's effects on impacted machines. One such post, such as Reddit user u/303i, described a fix for AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, the service that Amazon offers for cloud computing, in his post on the r/CrowdStrike subreddit. Quote, FYI, you need to recover an AWS EC2 instance. Detach the EBS volume from the impacted EC2, attach the EBS volume to a new EC2, fix the CrowdStrike driver folder, detach the EBS volume from the new EC2 instance, attach the EBS volume to the impacted EC2 instance. We're successfully recovering with this strategy. Caution: make sure your instances are shut down before detaching. Forced detaching may cause corruption. Edit: AWS has posted some official advice here at https://health.aws.amazon.com/health/status. This involves taking snapshots of the volume before modifying, which is probably the safer option. In my research, I also found similar comments for those facing issues with cloud servers in Azure as well, which is a competitor to AWS. Users had discovered that in the CrowdStrike folder on the affected system was a folder for a driver that Falcon relied on, and you could replace this folder with the newest update that was released, and that would fix this issue. Since these computers and servers were experiencing issues before they could log into Windows, this fix needed to be done on the hard drive attached to another computer that was not experiencing this issue. For a computer like a laptop, this would be done in one manner by physically opening the laptop, removing the hard drive, and then connecting it to another computer via an adapter to read and modify the contents on the hard drive. For a cloud server, the same thing was done, only digitally. As Reddit user 303i was explaining for Amazon cloud servers, they had to digitally remove the hard drive from the cloud machine and then connect it to another cloud machine, and then they were able to modify the contents in the driver folder for Falcon. So what exactly caused this? Well, according to CrowdStrike on their official blog detailing this incident, they say, CrowdStrike released a sensor configuration update to Windows systems. Sensor configuration updates are an ongoing part of the protection mechanisms of the Falcon platform. This configuration update triggered a logic error resulting in a system crash and blue screen BSOD on impacted systems. For those of you who watched the last video detailing McAfee's DAT5958 incident, does this sound familiar? This seems to coincide with the fix that was discovered by some users. In the same blog post, CrowdStrike noted that this faulty update was released at 4:09 UTC, but an update to fix this was released at 5:27 UTC. IT technicians and engineers likely saw the time difference in systems that were up and running that happened to receive the newer update to impacted machines that had this older time, and discovered that the fix would be to manually apply the update since their computers and servers couldn't exactly reach the internet to download the new update from CrowdStrike. It's likely that some systems, such as someone's work laptop, were offline and didn't receive the initial faulty update, whereas the server, like Natalie's web server, is online 24 hours and would have received the faulty update that triggered the chaos. CrowdStrike Falcon has versions that run on Windows as well as Linux and macOS systems, but only Windows systems were affected by this. According to CrowdStrike's blog, this was because channel file 291 controls how Falcon evaluates name pipe execution on Windows systems. Name pipes are used for normal, inter-process, or inter-system communication in Windows. The update that occurred at 4:09 UTC was designed to target newly observed malicious name pipes being used by common C2 frameworks in cyber attacks. The configuration update triggered a logic that resulted in an operating system crash. Channel file 291 was a file in the driver folder for Falcon that was replaced in users reported fixes and was only used in Windows, which is why Linux and macOS were unaffected. In simpler terms, what CrowdStrike said was that the initial update they pushed out caused some disruption for Windows in how communications were made in daily operations behind the scenes of what the user sees on their screen. This is similar to being in a noisy area and trying to listen to someone speak. Their noise gets drowned out, and you fail to hear anything that is said. On a more extreme case of this example, since you are unable to hear anything they say, you go into a violent seizure, and you are now unable to do anything at all because of the confusion. What led after this was a series of back and forths and finger pointing. Do you remember a little back when we talked about CrowdStrike Falcon having access to Windows OS kernel? Well, this caused Microsoft to have to respond as Microsoft was unfairly being called out after this series of outages, with some claiming that the outage was caused by Microsoft themselves. It's not difficult to understand why someone would jump to this conclusion, seeing as only Microsoft's OS was impacted, while Apple and Linux distros went unaffected. But Microsoft felt the need to speak up to defend themselves and to make sure the public understood that this was largely out of their hands and that this was not something they directly caused. Microsoft's CEO made a post on X, formerly Twitter, saying, "Yesterday, CrowdStrike released an update that began impacting IT systems globally. We are aware of this issue and are working closely with CrowdStrike and across the industry to provide customers technical guidance and support to safely bring their systems back online." In September 2024, it was announced that Microsoft was also working on a future update that would, quote, help CrowdStrike and other security vendors operate outside of the Windows kernel, unquote. Microsoft can be quite unpopular with those familiar with tech, but to give credit where credit is due, Microsoft had somewhat warned and tried to prevent against this sort of incident back in the Windows Vista days in 2006 to limit anyone except their own access to Windows OS kernel. Though, to be fair, This was likely more about control for themselves and less competitors for products such as Defender, which was to be released in a few years, than preventing an incident like this. At the time, Symantec, the company behind Norton Antivirus, and McAfee took issue at this and had complained to the European Commission to stop this and were successful in Microsoft backing down. In the same article I'm paraphrasing from, they mentioned how Apple had taken this step to lock down macOS's kernel from third parties so that developers could no longer access the kernel. A kernel panic is a term those familiar with Macintosh will know, when macOS, otherwise known as Macintosh, won't boot correctly, and refers partly to this, with a constant war between Apple and individuals looking to run Mac on unsupported hardware. Ironically, on the other hand, Linux's main claim to fame is that its kernel is open source, which means it is freely available to anyone and everyone, including you and I laymen and women, to view and modify in any way one desires. Though Microsoft may still have some legal issues here. In September 2024, a congressional hearing was called regarding the incident, bringing forth representatives from CrowdStrike regarding the incident, with specifics on CrowdStrike's access to the Windows OS kernel. In the hearing, it was said that 8.5 million Windows computers and servers went offline as a result of this outage. CrowdStrike defended their access to the kernel by saying that without access, defending the OS from malicious threats would be difficult. CrowdStrike asserted in the hearing that this incident would not occur again due to two reasons. Quote, CrowdStrike is more rigorous in testing configuration updates, which are released about 10 times a day. Falcon administrators now have the option of installing configuration updates when they want to. That should eliminate the risk of all CrowdStrike customers' Windows systems being knocked offline at the same time, as happened on July 19th, unquote. In the hearing, a congressman stated that the total cost of the outage led to $5.5 billion loss for the businesses. However, CrowdStrike did not confirm or deny that figure. Most businesses were back up and running within hours of this outage occurring, no matter how disruptive its impact was for various industries. The worst industry perhaps hit by this was airlines. Many airlines were grounded and flights were delayed or canceled as a result of this outage. United Airlines was impacted fairly hard. United Airlines was down for 72 hours. A reported 26,000 computers from the United system were affected in the chaos, spanning over 365 airports globally, according to United CEO Scott Kirby. Delta was hit even harder and drew more criticism. 2,500 Delta flights were canceled over about a week span. The United States Department of Transportation began an investigation into Delta over this disruption, since no other flights had encountered anything as long as Delta had. Transportation Secretary at the time, Pete Buttigieg, posted on X, "All airline passengers have the right to be treated fairly," in a reference directed at this situation. Delta largely placed the blame at CrowdStrike and Microsoft, demanding $500 million in compensation damages for the disruption. Microsoft fought back, saying that Delta refused free help on multiple occasions, even reportedly going as far as Delta CEO ignoring Microsoft CEO reaching out for assistance via email. In the same vein, CrowdStrike took issues with Delta's claims and also claimed Delta had ignored on-site assistance from CrowdStrike. Delta filed a lawsuit against CrowdStrike for the July outage. CrowdStrike countered with their own lawsuit against Delta to have Delta explain why it ignored CrowdStrike and to explain in a courtroom what really happened. This is actually partly why I wanted to wait before detailing this incident, as this is still ongoing as far as I can tell in my research, but we are approaching the 1-year anniversary very soon, so it's uncertain when the lawsuits will wrap up. But here we are, the largest outage in history. No evildoers, no villains with nefarious, sinister plans for world domination. No, this all came down to a simple mistake in code. It's quite interesting how bad things can get from a little mistake. But with that said, I want to take the time to make a point for those in the industry and those seeking to join the industry. Speaking as someone who has been in the industry, that every one of us has made a mistake or two in our careers, and mistakes are bound to happen. If anything, we can take solace that we didn't cause a catastrophe on the scale as this. Unless you are that person, then I am sorry for making that point. I remember a colleague once saying, "We've all taken down an office or two. It's a rite of passage in a way. The most important thing any of us can do, including the person or people behind this incident, is to learn from your mistakes and grow. Find out where you went wrong and what you could do differently in the future. Don't continually beat yourself up for a mistake, and try to remember that we've all been there once or twice. I think we can all agree that what is much worse is when you make the same mistake multiple times and never learn. But that's it to wrap up this incident. Tell me what you thought of this in the comments below. Is there anything I missed in this? Any new developments that have happened since? I'm still new to this, and I'd appreciate your constructive criticism, or if you have any compliments for me. I'm still finding my groove in all this and would appreciate some direction from the audience. From the audience, I hope to build and keep your attention for future videos. Until next time, stay safe and stay secure.